My name is Joe. I came here in 2005 to UCSF to learn how to be a physicist in the world of medicine. And I've had a really incredible 8 years here, and I think I'm going to have a few more to go. And many of you in the audience have played a substantial role in my education, my motivation, my inspiration in my life in general. And 3 of you, my parents Jeff and Joellen, and my fabulous Aunt Mary Kay, have been doing this for 33 plus years, so thank you all. And happy belated Mother's Day. Ada Byron King, Charles Stark Draper, Neil Armstrong, Charles Duke, Gene Kranz, Buzz Aldrin, Yukio Hori, Michael Collins. Unless you're an incredible nerd, you recognize only 2 of those names. If you're wearing a funny hat right now and seated somewhere in this region, you recognize those names and perhaps thought, Neil and Buzz are celebrated dudes. People pat them on the back and refresh them into doctors. I bet Joe's going to compare us to Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. You're right. We funny hat people are Neil Armstrongs and we are Buzz Aldrins. 4 years ago, we strapped in and we took off to careen through unfamiliar territory and land in a pretty special place. We did something amazing. Michael Collins, command module pilot. He stayed alone in lunar orbit to recollect Neil and Buzz fresh from lunar ascent for the return trip home. I'm pretty sure that a moon landing without a return trip would have been pretty awkward, and Dr. Blumenthal's speech would have been a little bit different. Charles Duke, Capcom. He was the voice of Mission Control, the one with the amazing southern drawl. During his time as Capcom on Apollo 11, Duke was the only individual to communicate directly with the crew of 3. Gene Kranz, flight director for the lunar landing, aka Ed Harris in the Tom Hanks movie. He's a pretty important guy. Yukio Hori of the Tokyo Stationery Company. Yukio developed the modern felt-tip pen, the style used to flip a circuit breaker that Buzz Aldrin accidentally broke while moving about the cabin. Had that switch gun unflipped, firing the main engines, and return from the moon may have been compromised. Again, a little awkward. Charles Doc Draper, founder and director of the MIT Instrumentation Laboratory, which made the moon landings possible through the Apollo guidance computer designed for NASA. And Ada Byron King, daughter of Lord Byron. Ada was a mathematician credited with writing the first computer program, long before anything resembling a modern computer even existed. Without this capability to make machines do our tedium, the moon would remain out of reach forever. These other folks, the ones that we've never heard about, or hear about only on the Discovery Channel, that's everybody else in this room not graduating from medical school today. You folks worked, you taught, you sacrificed, you supported, and you dreamed to make it possible for us to do what we've done the past 4 years. You did this just as much as anybody graduating today. So look around, give a thumbs up, pat on a back or 2, and think about the folks that made your own journey possible. I submit this day as evidence that we can, and we do, work together to do incredible things. So now that we're feeling pretty jazzed about ourselves, let's take a minute to think about some other incredible things that we can do together. In planning this speech, a small set of thoughts kept fighting their way through the tangles in my brain, slamming themselves forward into my obsession zone, a place typically filled with bad puns, beer, an entire catalog of San Francisco pigeons doing stupid things like eating rocks. Here are those thoughts. First, the 1988 John McTiernan masterpiece Die Hard may very well be the finest piece of art ever created. And Bruce Willis's John McClane's probably the biggest badass since Jack Burton from 1986's Big Trouble in Little China. You need to mention this. Second, it's unlikely that anyone will boo your speech. Graduation is too happy an event. Third, nobody knows how long you'll talk, so they're unlikely to walk out and miss the big show. Four, most of these people don't even live around here anyway. So these four thoughts give me the courage, or at least ease my fear, to be blunt, to be indelicate, to act like I know what I'm talking about, while mostly just winging it. Basically, to be myself. So while I'm up here being myself, I figured I'll talk about four things that I think we can all do together. Four things we can strive for, protect, foster, and promote. Equality, scrutiny, community, and creativity. Or as my nephew might say, play fair, no lying, let's be friends, and let's play all day. There are many ways to speak publicly, to convey an idea to many. Somehow, time and Western philosophy have concluded that the persuasive speech is the best speech. Clever use of rhetoric and a presentation of sophisticated reasoning will capture the audience and steer their minds. This isn't that speech. Equality. Through time, there are countless examples of us versus them. There have been and continue to be times and places where women are lesser persons than men, where the color of our skin carries more weight than the crux of our ideas, the messages of our words, the actions of our bodies, and the strength of our aspirations. There are times and places where our preferred flavor of religion does not only include us in a group of those similar, but also has cast us violently against every other group dissimilar. I could continue for hours citing both a characteristic and an instance in which that characteristic has led to the refusal of rights, respect, or even the recognition of someone whose core makeup, whose DNA, is far more similar than it is different. I could go on for hours, but I'm not going to. I'll stick to only one example. If we can't extrapolate an understanding or a principle from this one example, then we need a better speech from a much better speaker. My example is love. We stand in a time, and many of us come from places, where who we love determines the rights we have and the respect available to us. The idea that homosexuals are less than anyone else is flat out ridiculous. The idea that marriage or anything else should be restricted for the LGBTQ community is simply wrong. I'll let the folks smarter than me disprove the flimsy financial arguments. I'll let them disprove the flimsy financial arguments against gay rights. The notion that gay rights compromise our national identity and core values. The comical idea that ours is a country of particular religious affiliation with a particular stance on homosexuality. Let the delicate ones do the convincing. I've only got this microphone for a few minutes, so I'm going to be blunt. Discrimination based on sexual orientation is ludicrous, and those promoting it are cowards and jokers. Life is hard enough. Our bodies aren't durable, all the good TV shows get canceled, and we're all seen equally as targets by bacteria, viruses, earthquakes, cancer, and the IRS. Why make it hard with discrimination? Scrutiny and stance. I wonder if there was ever a time when the media didn't recognize its own seat at the table. Of course, the written word, the radio address, the televised and blog presentation, they've always possessed power in that they present the ideas of the influential and the happenings of the day. At some point, however, likely the day after the first written word, media started selectively presenting ideas, started selectively presenting happenings and facts to craft designer realities to propagate the ideologies of those with the very deepest pockets, the most seductive promises, and the most terrifying forecasts and warnings. Take a look at your TV, set your radio to AM. Everything that happens these days seems to get spun into a conspiracy lacking not only in fact and reality, but also lacking basic plot structures seen in Hollywood blockbusters. Like, say, one in which an Irish-American cop from New York City disrupts a Christmas Eve terrorist siege on the corporate headquarters of a multinational community. So what then are we to do when news media dabbles in bad fiction? Well, we can embrace scrutiny and skepticism. Maybe not to the point where we're all wearing tinfoil hats, but we can grow more comfortable with asking questions and challenging the popular. We can accept that maybe we just don't have an answer, a stance, or all the facts just yet. After all, part of jumping to conclusions is the comfort that the conclusion is in fact known, that the uncertainty which keeps us awake and worried at night has been dealt with. Just as we must go comfortable with not having all the facts, we must accept that certain facts do indeed exist. There are concrete events, ideas, and relationships. There are instances when someone is truly right and someone else is truly wrong. We mustn't be afraid to recognize this, and we mustn't feel like jerks to say something or someone isn't correct. We must stand up for what is right and true and stand in opposition to that which is false. Most importantly, we must not to jump to conclusions and assigning truth quickly out of convenience or to ward off the discomfort of uncertainty. Community. The oldest of us in this room might remember a time when neighbors shared food during rough times, when kids belonged to and were raised by the neighborhood almost as much as their own parents. A time when togetherness got this country through a world war. The slightly younger of us in this room rode their bicycles everywhere before it was cool. Vacationed via automobile to national parks and monuments and seeming caravans of suburbanites, and felt their neighborhoods torn at by the losses of a conflict in Vietnam. Eventually, some of those people made their way to San Francisco to draw the attention of the world to the good, the bad, and the dirty. Those of us too young to watch the original airings of Happy Days, but too old to know what the hell a Pokemon is, but we've grown through our own sea change. When we were young, we walked down the block, knocked on a door to gather a co-conspirator in the day's adventure. We grew up with our Little League teams. We watched our wisdom and rumors spread at the speed of Schwinn. As a good friend of mine would say, our social stencil was but a few miles wide, populated with familiar personalities. About midway to today, however, things started changing pretty rapidly. With the advent of the internet, we began to cruise down glass fibers to places much further than the end of the block, to gather co-conspirators in the day's adventure or the week's misadventure. Information was spreading amongst us at the speed of AOL. Within a few years, we could sit at home and elsewhere and instant message our friends, text everyone, to have more frequent and arguably less elegant conversations using a new language of LOLs, IMOs, LMFAOs, and whatever this YOLO crap is. Today we can purchase all household goods via Amazon.com. We can find news and entertainment with a geographic reach thousands of times greater than even the most gnarly 10-speed could permit. We can play elaborate games of hyper-realistic military tag, wearing dorky headsets holding 15-button controllers, shouting past our big-ass TVs, and across the world at some annoying 12-year-old who just sniped us with his digital machine gun. For all of the amazing things that this technology has made possible in a global sense, it has also allowed us to weaken our ties to each other locally. It is less common to seek out advice from the neighborhood badasses when Wikipedia or any number of chat boards can dole it out quicker with permanent copy and with greater variety. The necessity of reliance on local resources for goods, services, entertainment, and inspiration is dissolving. Our value to each other locally has been reduced in some way in exchange for an ethereal, less consequential relationship with vast numbers of folks whose hands will never shake. It's a good thing we're not the class of 2012, because the Facebook guy would have been here and that would have been technology here. The issue is actually us. We've gone a little overboard. We're reaping the amazing benefits of being connected while ignoring the important consequences, namely stretching and straining that real connection between us. We're social animals, and proof of this can be seen every time the power goes out for more than 2 hours. When our team wins the big game, when we rally against a common threat. It feels good to pull together and to rely on each other. We can do amazing things then. In our expansion through the world and into the future, let us not forget that the immediate and vital help we sometimes need can possibly be best found at arm's length. It is possible that the recent apparent increase in violent crimes, shootings, and bombings, while certainly multifactorial in origin, stem in part from the fact that our neighbors and communities, which used to be the kings, queens, knights, and rooks in our lives, these people have been reduced to pawns on a more global board. I also hate that metaphor, but it fit. So go meet your neighbors, buy them a beer, talk to each other, know your community. Because if you don't know them, you can't value them. If you can't value them, who will you watch die for with? Creativity. Progress is like a person being chased by a bird, a goose maybe. As the goose squawks and waddles towards our unfortunate protagonist, he walks in the direction opposite his feathered foe. Occasionally, the goose flaps his wings and comes fast at the heels of our hero, who then must take off running, only to return to a calm walk when the bird has landed to resume his stalking waddle. If we focus only on the person, we see a trajectory forward at a steady clip, interrupted by sudden bursts of acceleration. In progress, we move forward by exploiting what we know and what we have already done. We occasionally sprint into the future, though, sprinting thanks to creativity. Without creativity, we make only modest improvements on what has already been done. Evolution is slow without creativity. Without creativity, some terrible bird is going to bite us on the ass. I don't have any words on the specific applications of creativity. I'll let the experts talk about making clean water available to everyone everywhere, crowdfunding geniuses who lack business savvy, addressing the national debt, improving the education of our youth, making rock music actually rock again. I'll let awesome people talk about securing health care for everyone everywhere without pitting half of our country against the other half. I don't have any answers here, but I do have a reminder. We are a creative people. Our nation began as a new idea created by only a few. It was fleshed out by the creativity of many, and we have contributed vast positivity to the world through the creativity of all. Let us not forget that going off into the uncharted, while scary and uncertain and not always rewarding, is what we do best. I want to remind you that we all need to foster creativity. We need to publicly support it. We need to be critical of those who speak out against it. Creativity does not survive without nurturing. So that's it. That's what I've got. If each of us in this hall today leaves with these four things in mind, quality, scrutiny, community, and creativity, then I've done what I've hoped to do. We're about to diffuse back out into the world again with a far reach and a strengthened influence, some of us with very influential letters after our name. If we take just the simplest parts of these four ideas and stew on them, discuss them, spread them, then the world has that much more potential to be a place where people play fair, they don't lie, everyone is friends, and we all play every day. So be excellent to each other.